Some games stick with you because of their gameplay. Others stay because of their world. But a rare few become unforgettable for the way they tell their stories, the way they shape your choices, pull you into their character struggles, and leave you with questions you'll keep turning over long after the credits roll. This list is all about those experiences. These games understand how to blend narrative and gameplay into something that feels alive. Some are decades old, yet still relevant. Others are newer, but already timeless in their own right. Each game has its strengths and flaws, and we're talking about both, because great storytelling doesn't mean perfection. If you could, please subscribe and ring the bell. Also leave a like if you like the content. Silent Hill 2 isn't about jump scares. It's about something slower, heavier, a dread that seeps in and lingers long after you stop playing. You step into the shoes of James Sunderland, who comes to the fog-choked town after receiving a letter from his wife who's been dead for years. The story works because it's personal. The monsters aren't just random horrors. They're tied to James's guilt and the town's ability to manifest inner darkness. It's unsettling in ways that go beyond the usual horror beats, making you question the main character as much as the world around him. The PS2 era controls and clunky combat can feel rough now, and the camera occasionally fights you more than the enemies do. But here, those flaws almost work in the game's favor, amplifying the discomfort. The oppressive atmosphere, haunting soundtrack, and deliberate pacing make it feel more like a psychological descent than a standard survival horror game. Even decades later, few games match how Silent Hill 2 uses ambiguity and restraint. It doesn't explain everything. It leaves space for interpretation, and that's part of why it's still discussed, dissected, and remembered as one of the most impactful horror narratives in gaming.
I'm supposed to take you to the fireflies and walk away.
When The Last of Us launched in 2013, it proved that a game about survival could be just as much about people as it is about danger. Joel and Ellie's cross-country journey through a ruined America isn't just a road trip. It's a slow build of trust, conflict, and unspoken care in a world where kindness is a liability. The storytelling works because it's grounded. The infected are a constant threat, but the real tension often comes from human encounters. Desperate survivors, brutal raiders, and those trying to cling to some form of order. The dialogue feels lived in, and the quieter moments between the two leads hit just as hard as the big action beats. Gameplay-wise, it's not revolutionary. Stealth, scavenging, and crafting are familiar systems, but they're tightly tuned to feed the atmosphere. Every bullet matters. Every choice to engage or avoid a fight has weight. Some criticize it for being too linear or for leaning heavily on scripted sequences, but that's also what gives it its cinematic rhythm. It knows when to slow down and when to hit you hard. The ending, still debated to this day, refuses to give easy answers, which is exactly why it sticks.
Why do you make me repeat?
You need to help me.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is less about checking off objectives and more about inhabiting a place and time. Set in the fading days of the Wild West, it follows Arthur Morgan as he wrestles with loyalty to his gang and the creeping realization that the world is moving on without them. The detail is staggering, from weather that changes how your horse moves to townsfolk who remember how you treated them. That immersion makes even mundane moments, like riding through the countryside at sunrise, feel cinematic. But that same commitment to realism is also what turns some players off. Movement can feel heavy, animations are deliberate, and the pace demands patience. Story-wise, it's one of Rockstar's most human narratives. Arthur isn't a one-note outlaw. He's layered, conflicted, and capable of real growth depending on your choices. The supporting cast feels equally fleshed out, making later story beats hit harder because you've spent so much quiet time with them. It's not a game for rushing. If you go in expecting constant action, the slow build might frustrate you. But if you let it breathe, RDR2 delivers one of the richest, most affecting worlds gaming has seen, and an ending that lingers long after the credits roll. The 2018 reboot of God of War didn't just change the series setting, it reshaped its identity. Trading the over-the-top chaos of Greek mythology for the colder, more restrained world of Norse legends. It follows Kratos as he travels with his son Atreus to to fulfill his late wife's final wish. The combat is still heavy and satisfying, with the Leviathan axe quickly becoming one of the most iconic weapons in gaming. But what stands out most is how the action serves the story. Every fight, puzzle, and quiet boat ride deepens the bond and tension between father and son. Kratos, once defined by rage, is now a man wrestling with how to teach strength without passing on his own flaws. The single-shot camera design pulls you closer to the journey, but it also means the pacing can feel tight in some spots and padded in others. Side content varies in quality. Some favors and collectibles feel like filler. Yet the best optional quests rival the main story in depth and payoff. It's a rare reboot that respects its roots while confidently becoming something new, proving that a blockbuster action game can deliver just as much emotional weight as spectacle. Uncharted 4 closes Nathan Drake's story with a mix of high-stakes treasure hunting and quiet reflection. Years after leaving his dangerous life behind, Nate is pulled back in by the sudden return of his long-lost brother Sam, leading to one last globe-trotting search for pirate treasure. The set pieces are as spectacular as ever. Collapsing towers, high-speed chases, and a now-famous Jeep sequence that blurs the line between cutscene and gameplay. But what makes this entry stand out is its slower, more personal side. Conversations with Elena, doubts about Sam's motives, and the weight of Nate's past choices give the game an emotional depth the earlier entries only hinted at. That slower pace won't be for everyone. Some stretches favor climbing and dialogue over constant action, which might test players looking for pure adrenaline. Still, it's this balance that makes the big moments hit harder. You feel the years Nate has spent chasing danger, and you understand why he might finally want to stop. As a send-off, it's satisfying without feeling like fan service. It respects the character's history while letting him walk away on his own terms, leaving the series with both a bang and a sense of closure. Telltale's The Walking Dead isn't about mowing down hordes of zombies. It's about the people you meet while the world falls apart. Playing as Lee Everett, you're tasked with protecting a young girl named Clementine, and the choices you make shape not only your story, but how those around you see you. The game's strength lies in its writing. Conversations feel natural, characters have layered personalities, and relationships change based on your actions. It's not about finding the right choice, it's about deciding what you can live with, knowing you'll have to face the consequences later. The gameplay is light on traditional mechanics, leaning heavily on dialogue choices and quick-time events. Some players might find it too passive, but the format works for the kind of story it wants to tell. Technical issues, like choppy performance on older platforms, can break immersion, but the emotional core stays strong. By the time the first season ends, you're not just playing for survival. You're making decisions for someone who's watching, learning, and growing. And that responsibility hits harder than any jump scare. Nier Automata looks like a stylish action game at first glance. Fast combat, flashy moves, and a cast of sleek android protagonists. But beneath the surface, it's a deeply layered story about identity, purpose, and what it means to exist at all. Playing as 2B, 9S, and later A2, you uncover truths about the war between androids and machines that shift your understanding of everything you've been told. The gameplay blends Platinum Games' fluid combat with light RPG elements, platforming, and even genre shifts, at times turning into a bullet hell shooter or text adventure without warning. This variety keeps it fresh, even as some side quests can feel like padding. What makes it special is how it uses multiple playthroughs to reveal its full story. The first run gives you one perspective, the second reframes it entirely, and by the final endings, you realize the game's been leading you towards something far more emotional and human than you expected. It's not perfect. The open world is sparse in places, and the combat, while satisfying, isn't as deep as other Platinum titles. But Nier Automata is the kind of game that lingers in your head, not because of its mechanics, but because it makes you feel something rare, hope in the middle of hopelessness.
Magnesium.
Disco Elysium is an RPG where you never swing a sword or fire a gun in combat. Instead, every battle is fought with dialogue, deduction, and the strange voices in your own head. You play as a washed-up detective waking up with a hangover so bad you can't even remember your own name, tasked with solving a murder in a city that feels both fantastical and eerily familiar. The game's standout feature is its dense, sharp, and often darkly funny writing. Your skills aren't just stats. They're personalities that argue, encourage, or sabotage you mid-conversation. This creates a constant push and pull between what you want to say and what the voice in your head blurts out. It's not a game for everyone. The sheer amount of text can be overwhelming, and without traditional combat, it relies entirely on your investment in its world and characters. But if you're in, it's one of the most reactive and personal RPG experiences ever made. There's no hand-holding, and the story can spiral into unexpected territory depending on your choices. Sometimes tragic, sometimes absurd. By the end, you're left with a version of your detective that's entirely your own, for better or worse.
My job to make sure you behave.
I'm coming!
Lost Odyssey takes the classic turn-based JRPG formula and weaves it into a story about immortality, memory, and the weight of time. You play as Kame, a man who has lived for 1,000 years, yet remembers almost none of it, until fragments of his past start returning through dreamlike short stories. The combat is traditional but well-polished, blending magic, physical skills, and a timing-based ring system that adds a bit of engagement to each attack. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it nails the fundamentals in a way that feels deliberate and confident. What really sets it apart are the 1,000 Years of Dreams segments, text-based vignettes that read like intimate short stories, exploring moments of love, loss, and the quiet tragedies that come with living too long. These sections slow the game down, but they give it an emotional weight most RPGs never reach. Pacing can be uneven, and load times in the original release were notoriously long, but the payoff is a heartfelt, reflective adventure that feels like the spiritual successor to the golden era of JRPGs. For players willing to take their time, it's one of the genre's hidden treasures.
I shall heal your soul.
Heavy Rain is built on one question. How far would you go to save someone you love? Told through 4 playable characters connected by the hunt for the origami killer. It's a branching, interactive drama where your decisions can change or abruptly end the story. Its biggest strength is tension. Scenes often play out like a chain of small but stressful moments. Holding your breath during a break-in, fumbling through a high-stakes chase, or deciding whether to cross a moral line. Failures aren't just game over screens. They push the narrative in unexpected directions, and the game never stops to reset your mistakes. Not everything lands perfectly. The voice acting is uneven, some dialogue feels awkward, and the infamous Press X to Jason meme shows how easily a serious moment can slip into unintentional comedy. But when the story hits its stride, the mix of mystery, urgency, and emotional stakes works. It's not flawless, but Heavy Rain was an early example of choice-driven storytelling in games that treated consequences as permanent, and it paved the way for many narrative titles that came after.
Oh, one last thing. Never can't gain their trust.
Mass Effect 2 took everything good about the first game and stripped away most of the clunk. The result was a sharper, more focused RPG shooter hybrid built entirely around one goal: getting your team ready for a mission that might kill them all. The genius is in the structure. You spend most of the game recruiting characters and earning their loyalty through personal quests, each one revealing layers you didn't expect. From hardened mercenaries to mysterious scientists, no one feels like filler, and their survival in the finale depends on how well you've understood and supported them. The combat is tighter, the controls more responsive, and the pacing's smoother than its predecessor. Still, it's not flawless. The RPG elements are lighter than some fans wanted, and the resource mining minigame can feel like busy work. But as a character-driven narrative, it's hard to beat. The final suicide mission changes depending on your choices and preparations, making the climax feel uniquely yours. It's a rare sequel that not only improves on the original, but also stands tall as one of the most memorable sci-fi stories in gaming. Some open-world games give you space, but little reason to care about it. The Witcher 3 fills every corner with stories worth finding. Playing as Geralt, you're not chasing generic fetch quests. You're tracking missing people, untangling local feuds, and dealing with choices that rarely have a clean good or bad answer. The main plot of searching for Ciri while navigating political chaos and the looming threat of the Wild Hunt is strong on its own, but it's the side quests that truly define the game. From the tragic Bloody Baron arc to smaller village mysteries, the Pan quest, the writing treats even throwaway missions with care. Combat is functional rather than flashy, and while it improves with skill upgrades and potion prep, it's not the main draw. Exploration, dialogue, and decision-making carry the experience, helped by a world that feels lived in. Peasants muttering as you pass, merchants adjusting prices based on how you've treated them. It's not perfect. The inventory can be a chore, the character navigation and combat can be weird. Controlling Roach is a gamble, and the sheer volume of content can be overwhelming. But when a game can make you remember the fate of a minor NPC as clearly as the ending itself, you know it's doing something special.
Me to kill the beast.
I hope you have your sling.
Set in 14th century France during the Black Death, A Plague Tale: Innocence is less about historical accuracy and more about human connection under impossible circumstances. You play as Amisha, a young noble forced to protect her sickly younger brother Hugo as the Inquisition hunts them and plague-ridden rats swarm the land. The gameplay leans on stealth and puzzle-solving rather than combat. You're not a warrior, you're a survivor, making every escape feel tense. The rat swarms are a standout mechanic. Moving like a living tide, you have to manipulate with light and fire. It's simple in concept, but creates some unforgettable set pieces. The story is carried by Amisha and Hugo's evolving relationship. Early resentment gives way to genuine care, and their small victories feel meaningful in a world that offers them little hope. Still, the dialogue can be uneven at times, and stealth encounters sometimes feel more trial and error than strategic. Visually, it punches above its weight for a mid-budget title, with striking lighting and atmospheric environments. By the end, it's not the rats or the plague that stick with you. It's the bond between two siblings who never asked for heroism, but find it anyway.
This blade is yours.
Back in 1999, most RPGs focused on swords, spells, and loot. Planescape Torment had those things, but it cared far more about what you said than what you swung. Playing as the Nameless One, an immortal with no memory of his past, you explore the bizarre, shifting city of Sigil, a place where demons, gods, and mortals mingle, and where even a passing conversation can change the course of your journey. The writing is dense, but purposeful. Every line feels like it's building the world or revealing something about your character. The choices you make aren't about good or evil in the typical RPG sense. They're about shaping an identity, piecing together who you've been, and deciding who you'll be now. Its biggest strength, the writing, is also its biggest barrier. There's a lot of text, and if you're not ready to sink into it, you might bounce off. Combat exists, but it's secondary and clunky compared to modern standards. The pacing can feel slow, especially early on. Yet even with those rough edges, no other game has captured its particular mix of philosophy, melancholy, and weird beauty. It's not just about what happens, it's about the ideas it leaves you with. And that's why it's still discussed over 2 decades later.
I've remembered something.
Some games are called timeless because of nostalgia. Chrono Trigger earns it. Released in 1995, it blended a sharp, fast-paced RPG system with one of the most cleverly structured stories of its era. A time travel adventure where actions in one era ripple across centuries. The game wastes no time pulling you in. Within the first hour, you're hopping between the past and future, meeting characters whose arcs pay off in ways that still feel satisfying today. The cast, from the silent protagonist Crow to the brooding frog and the quirky robot Robo, is memorable not just because of their personalities, but because the game gives each of them moments to matter. Combat is classic turn-based, but with a twist. Characters can combine their abilities for dual tech and triple tech attacks, which keeps battles lively. It's snappy, with no random encounter grind slowing you down, and the pacing makes it easy to stay hooked. That said, it's not flawless. Some side quests feel thin compared to the main story. And if you played it multiple times, the early hours can feel overly familiar. But its multiple endings, clever use of time travel, and tight runtime make it one of the few RPGs that feels just as fresh on a replay. Nearly 30 years later, Chrono Trigger still shows how to tell a sweeping, emotional story without wasting a single scene, something even modern games struggle to match. When Final Fantasy VII landed in 1997, it didn't just launch a new chapter for the series. It changed what people thought a video game story could be. Cloud's journey from detached mercenary to reluctant hero plays out against a world struggling under corporate greed, environmental collapse, and an enemy who's as personal as he is cosmic. The Midgar opening remains one of the strongest in RPG history, dropping you straight into a rebellion with no slow onboarding. From there, the story widens into something far more complex, balancing large-scale stakes with intimate character arcs. Aerith, Tifa, Barrett, and the rest aren't just sidekicks. They have their own motivations, flaws, and growth. Of course, not every part has aged perfectly. The translation is clumsy in places, pacing dips in the middle act, and the blocky character models can be a shock to new players. But the writing and atmosphere still carry it, and the score remains unforgettable. The remake reimagines the early part of the story with modern visuals and expanded scenes, but the original's raw charm is hard to replicate. For all its imperfections, Final Fantasy VII blends emotion, spectacle, and ambition in a way that made it a cultural touchstone, and it's still worth experiencing in its original form. Before Persona 3, the series was niche. This was the game that pushed it into the spotlight, blending everyday school life with supernatural battles against shadow creatures. By day, you manage classes, friendships, and part-time jobs. By night, you climb Tartarus, a massive, otherworldly tower that appears during the hidden dark hour. The hook isn't just the stylish combat or the time management system. It's how those two have feed into each other. The relationships you build during the day directly strengthen you in battle, making your choices feel meaningful. And while the social sim side is colorful and often lighthearted, the main story is anything but. Themes of mortality and the inevitability of loss run throughout, giving the ending a real emotional punch. Still, it's a game of its time. Tartarus is repetitive, with randomly generated floors that can blur together, and the AI-controlled teammates in the original version can be frustrating. Later releases, like Persona 3 Portable and the upcoming Reload remake, improve on these issues, but the original still has a certain atmosphere that's hard to replicate. It's not flawless, but proved that a JRPG could blend slice-of-life charm with heavy, thought-provoking storytelling. And that formula would go on to define the series' global success. At first glance, BioShock Infinite feels like a dream. A floating city bathed in sunlight, barbershop quartets on the corner, and patriotic banners on every street. But it doesn't take long for that postcard image to twist. You play as Booker DeWitt, sent to Columbia to find a girl named Elizabeth. And the deeper you go, the more you see the city's idyllic facade give way to fanaticism, oppression, and something even stranger lurking underneath. The relationship between Booker and Elizabeth is the emotional core. Elizabeth isn't just an escort mission. She's active, helpful, and central to the story's biggest reveals. Their growing connection gives the narrative a human anchor, even as it veers into mind-bending territory about parallel worlds and cause and effect. Gunplay is fast and flashy, with vigors adding variety to the standard shooting, but the combat arenas can feel repetitive over time. The pacing is also a point of debate. The middle section drags in spots, and some plot turns come so quickly they're hard to absorb on a first playthrough. Flaws aside, few games swing for the fences the way Infinite does. Its ending is divisive, but it cements the story as one that isn't afraid to take risks. And whether you love it or not, it's hard to forget.
Is it someone new?
Life is Strange starts small. A photography student named Max returns to her hometown of Arcadia Bay, reconnects with an old friend, and discovers she can rewind time. What begins as a personal story about friendship slowly unravels into something heavier, mixing mystery, teen drama, and moral dilemmas that don't have easy answers. The episodic structure works in its favor, letting choices breathe and giving you time to think about their consequences. Rewinding time is more than a gimmick. It forces you to confront the idea that even with the power to undo mistakes, you can't avoid every bad outcome. The writing captures awkward, heartfelt teenage conversations well, even if some slang feels forced. Visually, it's modest, but the soft, hand-painted style matches the tone. The licensed indie soundtrack is a highlight, giving quiet scenes real emotional weight. On the downside, animations can be stiff, and the pacing occasionally dips in the middle episodes. Still, it nails the feeling of small-town intimacy layered over something ominous. By the end, the decisions you've made feel personal, and the final choice sticks with you long after the screen fades to black.
Chloe from Hollywood.
Detroit Become Human puts you in control of 3 android protagonists, Connor, Kara, and Marcus, each navigating their own path in a near future where artificial intelligence is on the verge of rebellion. It's an interactive drama where your decisions shape the story in big and small ways, branching into dozens of possible outcomes. The game's biggest strength is how those choices feel immediate. Fail a quick time event, and a character can die. The story doesn't reset to save them. Each lead offers a different perspective. Connor's detective work mixes tension and investigation. Kara's journey is personal and human, and Marcus's arc tackles the larger political fight for android rights. Not all writing lands equally well. Some moments lean heavy on cliches, and certain metaphors for real-world oppression lack subtlety. But when it works, it works. Small, quiet scenes can hit just as hard as the high-stakes set pieces. Visually, it's one of the most polished narrative games of its kind, with impressive motion capture and detail. And thanks to the branching design, it has strong replay value, encouraging you to see how wildly different your story could have turned out.